on CityCast Nashville, I'm joined by Holly McCall, the editor of the nonprofit, nonpartisan news organization Tennessee Lookout, to give you the basics on local media literacy. We're going over some of our options for Nashville's news, how to spot biased journalism, and differentiating between opinion and fact. It's always important to fact check, but it's especially relevant as we're coming up on election season, so pay attention and develop some healthy skepticism. And hey, stick around after the interview for our segment, A Mile in Their Boots, presented by Tecovas, spotlighting the people who shape the culture and community of Nashville. Today we're talking to Aaron Williams, the director of Hub Nashville. CityCast Nashville is presented by our exclusive launch sponsor, Tecovas. It's September 11th. I'm Grace Fuse, and this is what Nashville's talking about. Holly, thank you so much for coming on.
I'm so happy to be here, Grace. I'm really honored to be invited. You've had some great guests.
Oh my God. Yeah, we have, but you're a great guest too, and we're excited to have you. Okay, so we have some really important topics to go over today, and one of them is something that we've mentioned in passing in other episodes, this idea that certain local media organizations, news organizations, have specific ties or higher-ups that have political party affiliations or ideologies that maybe bring biases to their media coverage. Can we just go over really quick some of the local media organizations that may have some bias from their connections?
Wow. So you're really starting out by asking me to rat people out.
Yeah, I am.
I think we see more of that in conservative outlets. There is an outlet called the Tennessee Star that is, I'd say, very conservative. Maybe not necessarily Republican per se. There's another outlet called the Tennessee Conservative News. It's based in Chattanooga, but we see a lot of it on social media, and they are openly conservative. Like, they make no bones.
They at least have conservative in the title.
Yeah, they make no bones about it. And then the Tennessee Holler, which I actually was a founder of, but left because Justin Canoe is great. He's a friend of mine, but we had different views of the news. Justin also makes no bones about the fact that he is liberal. And so you know what you're getting when you get into that. And I think that's fine. I think the question comes when you don't know what the biases and the agendas are.
Yeah. Are there some places where it's like really subtle and we might not be aware of the biases? I've heard that the Tennessean has some ties that maybe make it maybe a little biased sometimes.
I can't say that with any truth. You know, the Tennessean is owned by a hedge fund. It's Gannett Gatehouse. And I think when you are owned by a corporation or people who have money invested in such a direct way, it has the potential to influence your coverage. You know, there are folks, the Tennessean used to be the liberal newspaper. The Banner was the conservative newspaper. The original Banner folded in 1999, and we were left with the Tennessean. And, you know, there's still some good reporters there. And I'm always hesitant to criticize reporters, but I don't think we see the level of accountability from the Tennessean as an institution that we used to see. When we used to see the Tennessean regularly expose and take on politicians, and we see less of that than we used to.
How do we pick up on biases that are maybe more subtle as readers?
Well, I think it takes an educated reader. I will say that, you know, I think there was a study done several years ago, and I can't remember where it was now, or maybe it was a report, that people tend to trust their local news more than they trust the national media. Like, there are plenty of people who don't trust, air quote, the media, but they trust their local news. And so I think it takes a very educated reader. Many of the people who listen to the CityCast are pretty tied in, pretty educated, and kind of know what they're getting. But again, not everyone has the capacity or the time to really dig in and research the way you or I might. So that is the challenge in trying to educate people. There's more of an education of readers on here's what you should be looking for. And I will say it is very difficult to not have a little bit of bias because reporters are human. And when you cover the same type of stories every single day, and I say this as somebody who, you know, I'm an editor of the Tennessee Lookout. We are a daily news, but it's very difficult, I think, when you are covering the same issues every day and you see patterns of behavior from elected officials or government. It's almost impossible for an individual reporter with any outlet to not form a bias. But the question is, can you write without relaying that bias in your coverage? And if you'll allow me to go ahead just a little bit, and then I will let you talk, Grace, and ask questions. But I think here's the issue we've gotten into, and this is where I take my headphones off and put my tinfoil hat on. But there's been so much misinformation relayed over the last decade or so that now outlets that report the truth, that are reporting a factual story, there are people who will construe that as biased. We cover state government, and state government is run by Republicans. And so we cover Republicans a lot. And there are plenty of conservatives and Republicans who think that we are hugely biased. I think we're just covering the news, and there are just not many Democrats in state leadership. At the local level, yes. But, the new Nashville banner, I think, is about as unbiased as you can get. And I saw somebody on social media referring to them as a bunch of screaming liberals lately. And I'm like, I don't know where you're getting this. But the issue is, I think, sort of the misinformation and disinformation over the last decade has really squirreled the way people think about the media.
So what do you mean when you say in your writing you don't show a bias? Are there actually local news organizations that just have no opinion or framing in terms of the way they tell a story, where it's just fact, 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 fact? Does that exist for us?
I mean, yes, I think the banner does that. And I would like to think that we do that. Now, we do have a commentary section, and what you get in that's going to be different than you get in our news stories.
Sure.
I do think that most news stories write just the facts for outlets like us, for the banner, even for the Tennessean. The Nashville scene gets a little bit, they have a little commentary in theirs, I think. But again, I think the issue becomes, how do you get readers to believe that what they are reading is actually the truth? There are so many newer outlets, not even just in Nashville or Tennessee, but just all over, that have sprung up that do have pretty overt biases that you hardly know what to believe these days. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I think that almost brings me to perhaps an elephant in the room with these media conversations, which is, I think if we're being realistic, at least people in my age bracket will often say they read an article when they watched a TikTok. And I think some of this is coming from this a mistrust of the overall media, I guess, that also means that we're looking for individual personal experiences that are firsthand. But how do we identify misinformation on social media and that kind of stuff if we're really just hearing one individual's perspective?
I would say, and I am not your generation, I'm quite a bit older, but there are several, I'd say, rock solid, trustworthy outlets. And one of those is the Associated Press. And so if this is something that you can help convey, you cannot believe everything you hear, which I think, generally we know that. And I think most people would say, yes, you can't believe everything you hear. But then you or me or our friends get on TikTok and oh my God, so-and-so said.
Yeah.
It's really important to fact check. And again, the Associated Press is rock solid. Reuters, Reuters, you know how to spell it. Not everybody does. Reuters is another rock solid news outlet. And if you cannot find something on either of those two outlets, or even in ABC, if you can't find it in ABC or NBC, it's probably worth questioning. And I think that's the biggest message I would convey, is to not accept anything you read blindly.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I want to say, as you say that, my inner lazy voice is saying, I don't wanna. And with that, do we really need to research and cross-check everything we read? Or what are the kinds of things that we should keep our eyes out for? We should say, maybe I should check AP for that.
Well, I mean, look, I love Twitter, and I will tell people openly it's one of my few hobbies. I love Twitter, and it's not what it used to be. But there's a lot of crazy stuff on Twitter. And even not crazy, but things that are slightly wrong. A writer might see a reputable story, and then it turns into a game of telephone, where it gets a little skewed, or somebody just sees the headline and doesn't read the full story. It's hard for me to tell you exactly, and I know you wouldn't expect me to, which tweets. But if something sounds, I was going to say, if something sounds improbable, it should be checked. But the thing is, hardly anything sounds improbable.
Everything sounds improbable these days.
And I don't really have any easy solutions here. It's just, most people are just trying to get food on their table, do their job, get their kids to bed, and you want to know what's going on in the world, and don't have the capacity. And this is not an insult. It's just life. We don't have the capacity to fact check everything. So I think for your readers, it's important to know which sources you're going to. And again, locally, I like to think we do a great job of covering state government. The Banner is doing a good job of covering local government. There are a couple of reporters at the Tennessean who are quite good, Melissa Brown and Vivian Jones. The scene, I think, is fun. They have good news, but also they put a little bit of a fun spin on it. But I think the more close to local news sources you could get, probably the better off you are knowing that the facts are correct.
Got it. So you kind of agree with that sentiment that you were sharing at the beginning of like you maybe trust local media more than larger media sources. Okay.
Yeah, even in rural parts of Tennessee, there are people who their main access to news is either a big network like Fox or MSNBC or CNN or their small town newspaper. Yeah. And they might not believe what they see in the Tennessean even because it's in Nashville and it's liberal. I don't particularly think it's liberal anymore, but that's the old perception. And all media is liberal, which is another misperception. But you do trust what you see in your small town newspaper that still prints and comes out once a week. And that's actually, I think that's the most important thing I think the Lookout does. We share our content for free. Yeah. And there are probably 35 or 40 outlets across the state that carry our news stories. Yeah. So I hope, this is my personal pitch, I hope that we're making a difference by sharing what's going on in the state, what state leaders are doing, and maybe folks will believe it if they read it in their small local newspaper.
All right, admit it. It's time to replace your not-so-trusty old boots. You know the best place to shop for quality handcrafted men's and women's boots is at your local Tacova store, at the Mall at Green Hills, or on Broadway by the Ryman. That's right, you now have 2 locations to choose from, so stop by and grab a cold one as you peruse. Tacova's Nashville is at your service. It's always a challenge to find boots that fit well and can survive a night walking around town, but you can find your perfectly fitted dream boots with the help of Tacova's expert staff. Your new Western boots can elevate a casual look or add a refined flair to any outfit. Everyone will be asking where you got your sick boots, but I won't be asking because I know they must be Tacovas. That's TECOVAS.com. Don't go gently, y'all. I'm here with Holly McCall, editor of Tennessee Lookout. I'm wondering with Tennessee Lookout what exactly your intentions are and what you feel like you're doing differently. I mean, I love this idea of not charging for your information because there's nothing I resent more than being told by one person that I'm not being careful enough with my media consumption and then try to read an article that I think is going to be helpful and informative. And then it lets me read 3 sentences and then ask for a $20 membership. What do you think you're doing day to day at Tennessee Lookout that helps you be nonpartisan, unbiased as best you can be?
Well, for one thing, I have no idea what my reporters' political or partisan affiliations are.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you. And Anita Wadawati, for instance, covers policy. She hates covering partisan politics. People who know me know that I'll be open about it. I did run for office as a Democrat once. And I think there are many Republicans, at least in leadership, who think, oh, we're super liberal because Holly McCall ran for office. I don't put any finger on the scale with my reporters. I've never once told them to do a story. Sometimes I might make suggestions. I don't tell them how to write it. I think they would all rebel if I did. We chase stories that we hear. Sam Stockard has been so deeply involved in covering state government for years that he can get anybody to talk to him. We do talk to Republicans. We don't just call Democrats.
Yeah.
And we just try to be fair. And sometimes being fair doesn't mean that folks are going to like what they read. If you're reading the Tennessee Lookout and you are locked into a hardcore Republican conservative ideology, and you're going to see reports about Governor Bill Lee continues to say that Core Civic is a valuable partner for the state, even though they've been fined multi-millions of dollars and there's a federal investigation. If you love Bill Lee, you might think we're being unfair.
Yeah.
I call that reporting the facts. But there are no easy answers to this.
Right. I know, and I'm asking for them, which is probably not fair of me.
No, it's your job. Boil it down.
I'm going to try to. When we talk about people not necessarily having the capacity to look into research, cross-check, all this kind of stuff. I mean, I know I put aside a certain amount of time in my morning to read the news, but depending on how many articles I'm looking at, no, I don't have time to fact-check every single thing I read.
So my personal goal for people when they read our news is I want them to be informed. I want them to know here's how your state government is acting, and here's how they're spending money, and here's how they're not spending their money. And oh, by the way, here's who your lawmakers are taking money from. Like Core Civic, for instance, which we've written about a lot, private prison company. They've given a ton of money to lawmakers. So I think it's helpful for readers and voters, because many readers also, there's that level of civic engagement. You should know that, hey, Governor Bill Lee has taken X amount, his campaign has taken X amount of money, $45,000 or whatever from Core Civic. And by the way, there's all this legislation passing that's going to create new prisons, new jails, and it might be helpful. So I think that's my goal, is for people to have the information to make intelligent choices about what they think, who they support. But when you get an outlet that is openly partisan, then I think that is a different animal. Then you were trying to make people think a certain way. You want to convince them that your reporting is the only accurate truth, and it might be supporting a party, or it might tell you that Republicans are all bad, or that Democrats are all bad. I don't think that's responsible. That's my opinion. I also think that when you've got openly partisan organizations, you tend to draw your base. You're not expanding knowledge to other people. Like, I would like everybody to read the Tennessee Lookout. I'm sure the Nashville Banner would say the same thing. I don't care about your partisan affiliation. But, there are outlets that are, like I'll say the Tennessee Conservative News, because they're very open about it. They have campaign workshops. It's not an unbiased news source, and I think they're open about that. And if you go into that knowing what you're getting, then it's fine. You're not going to learn new perspectives. You're only going to see things that you possibly already believe. I think it's good to keep an open mind and learn new perspectives.
If you just have the information, you can make your own judgment. You can have your own opinions. You can connect the dots however your brain works, however your perspective works. I want to talk, this is maybe just more relevant to me and the people in media and podcasting, that kind of stuff. I mean, I see that the Daily Wire is in Franklin now, right? And if you are in Nashville, and maybe you are one of the thousands of audio engineers here, you're looking for a job in media, you're looking to get into something like this, and you see Daily Wire is always freaking hiring. Is it possible as a journalist to go into one of these companies and then have unbiased reporting on an individual level? How far down does this come in terms of, like, is there somebody in those kinds of organizations that comes down and says, no, you framed this in too liberal of a way or too conservative of a way, and that's not in line with our branding? Like, how could I on an individual level be part of that? Can I be in an unbiased way?
So that's an excellent question. And I don't clearly know the inner operations of the Daily Wire, but I would guess no. I would guess no. I don't blame anybody for getting a job that pays their bills. Like, I'm pretty cool about that. Like, if you came to me, let's just say you did not have this wonderful gig at CityCast, and you came to me as a friend and said, look, man, I got to have a job, and the Daily Wire is hiring. I happen to think the Daily Wire is borderline propaganda, if not complete propaganda, and does harmful things. They have been very supportive of these anti-transgender actions. They whipped up anger at Vanderbilt University Medical Center a couple of years ago over transgender issues. And I think it's been very harmful. However, if you came to me and said, man, I'm really broke and I have to have a job and they're hiring, they're paying me $80,000 a year, I would have to say, God, Grace, I just think that's probably not, I don't think you're going to be happy there. I know you, and I don't think you're going to be happy. And I don't think this is the way that you look at the world. But I would say, a girl's got to eat. I would guess, though, that if you wrote that, Kamala Harris is the savior of the world, and of course I'm exaggerating here, but I would think you would get some pushback.
Yeah, might get booted.
Yeah. And, again, not everybody knows what the Daily Wire is.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
But I would say even from my editorial process, if one of my writers inserted something, because it's really hard not to, there are times that I've cut things from my writer's stories that seem a little bit snarky or a little bit over the line, one way or another. It might be snarky about a Democrat. It might be snarky about a Republican, or it might seem to insert a little bit of opinion into a news story, and I will cut that out. We have an opinion section. That's the place for opinion.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned snark, because if I'm trying to make my own opinion, I'll be honest, no matter what news source I'm reading, I do not want to read snark. And it doesn't mean that when I'm having conversations, I don't have a heavy dose of snark personally. But if I'm reading a news source and I read something that perceives as snarky, it's almost like, okay, what's up your butt this morning? I don't know. It's hard for me to tell.
Have you been reading my newsletter, Grace?
Yeah, I get it.
I mean, I am a little snarky, but I think part of the issue there too is it in something that is a person's opinion and commentary, or is it in a news story? But
100%.
That's another issue where people don't discern that as well as they used to. Like, I will get emails sometimes about one of my commentary pieces. It'll say, well, this story is biased. I'm like, okay,
Yes,
well,
it is.
let me explain. This is my opinion,
Right.
and nobody else's. I'm sure my reporters cringe sometimes when they see what I write, but that is my opinion. And honestly, it is part of my job. And I think it's valuable to present opinions, not just from me. Like, my opinion is probably the least important, but from other people in the community.
Last thing, we at CityCast, obviously, we do have this sweet gig, and we're trying to be journalistic. We're trying to be nonpartisan. We're trying to be fair. Do you have advice for us on how to be fair with our coverage, especially since we are coming up on election season now?
You know, if you want to cover elections, you have to cover everybody. Not every election, not every seat, because there are, I don't know, 95 people running for state house. But if you choose to cover an election, you really do need to try to cover people equally. I got called out for a reader yesterday for a story we did because they said you only have a picture of the Democratic candidate. Well, I went back and looked at the story, and it was actually a story about 5 or 6 races. It had one picture in it. And honestly, the picture we ran was because we happened to have seen this person at an event we were covering anyway, and we will be covering this particular election, and we will get a photo of the other candidate. But we just haven't had a chance to. But I do think it's really important when you're covering a race to try to be fair and cover everybody equally. And if you can't reach somebody, or if someone is an unserious candidate, then you need to report this person didn't respond. We tried multiple times. One of the things I tell young reporters, because I am an old person, is you have to try repeatedly. You can't email somebody once. You have to call them, pick the phone up, go old school, email them, text them. And after 3 or 4 times you can't reach them, then you can say they didn't respond to comment. But I think you just can't be too dedicated about trying to reach everybody and present what they say, even if they say something wild. If they say something false, you should call that out. But if they say something wild but not demonstrably false, you have to say their platform is to, I don't know, set a banana stand up on every corner of Nashville. Whatever. I don't know. I'm just fascinated. There's a banana stand in downtown Nashville I'm fascinated with.
I didn't know about that, but I'm glad.
Well, that's another episode for you.
That is
free banana
episode.
Stand.
I love it. I love it. We'll absolutely have you back to talk about that. Thank you so much, Holly. We really appreciate your time. This is really helpful.
Thank you, Grace.
And hey, don't go anywhere. In a second, our executive producer, Whitney Pasterek, is walking a mile in the boots of Aaron Williams, the director of Hub Nashville, in a segment sponsored by Tecovas.
Hey y'all, it's CityCast Nashville executive producer Whitney Pasterek, and I am here with Aaron Williams, who is the director of Hub Nashville. Hub Nashville, our beloved local service where if you need something from your metro government, you can submit a request. Aaron, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
For those who might be unacquainted, can you briefly explain what Hub Nashville is?
Sure. It's Nashville's 311 option. So it's your way to reach non-emergency services and information for metro government.
What is your role there?
We're a collaborative effort. We have a call center team that answers calls Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and they're part of the Department of Emergency Communications. So they report to me and I kind of direct their work and make sure they're properly staffed and resourced and have the information they need and handle any escalations. And then we have hub support at ITS, and I work a lot with them on how we expand and continue to support departments.
I understand you've been at Metro for quite a while. How did you land at Hub Nashville?
I started in the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods 22 years ago under Mayor Purcell.
Wow.
As a neighborhood liaison. So my focus was primarily constituent services. Mayor Berry came in, and the very first day she arrived, she said, build me a 311. So I worked with Keith Durbin and Lionel Matthews and Nancy Van Rees and a lot of community folks to think about what that means and what it should be and how we would best serve our departments and residents, visitors to Nashville. And then we launched in 2017. And somewhere around there, they gave me the title of Director of Hub as opposed to just constituent services.
What drew you to working in Metro in the first place?
A job. I was working at Gaylord, actually, in their employment trailer as a receptionist at 23 years old, 24, I guess. And it's paid a little bit more. It's not always easy work. But the people that you get to work with on the Metro side are like the best folks in Metro. They care the most, at least in my experience. I'm really proud of the work we do. And it's, hard work that gets something done and makes somebody's life better, feels valuable.
So let's walk a mile in your boots. Tell us what an average day in the life of Hub Nashville looks like.
Again, let me say, I have the very best team in the world, and they get on the phones 8 a.m. and take calls 600 to 700 a day for the 10 folks that are on the phone.
Wow.
And they are, again, the very best folks. A day in the life, honestly, I wake up first thing, check Twitter, check for whatever's come in overnight.
Wait, so when I complain on Twitter, it goes to you?
That would be me.
Well, thank you so much for your service. So wait, how many requests total do you get?
Generally about 1,000 a day, but it varies a lot. So in a month, we do on average 25 to 26,000.
And that's everything from I need a new trash can to I hate the Airbnb.
Yep. Anything in Metro that you have a question about. And if it's not already in the hub, you can always use that other request. We get a lot of those because we don't know every question that's going to come. We've tried to predict what people would ask as much as we can. And as we get questions, we add them. So it's continually expanding. But if you use that other, it comes to me and the call center supervisor, and we try to route that for you and find an answer for you.
So we know literally why your work matters to Nashville. It helps keep the city running. But culturally and in terms of community, what do you think your work and Hub Nashville mean to this place?
Personally, let me just set it up what I think it's important. I think the whole point of Hub was to kind of work myself out of a job. So when we started Hub, the only way that someone would know how to connect with their government was you were close to your council person, you were, connected enough to government to know what department did what, or you knew to call the mayor's office and get to someone like me. And the whole point of Hub is you shouldn't have to know any of that. You shouldn't have to know anything besides here's the app on my phone or here's a number to call. And that's good enough. And so that's really why I think it's important. And I think it's important to make sure we reach people however we can. So we have 2 Spanish speakers on the phone. We have 2 Kurdish speakers on the phone. The website's available in the app in 5 additional languages. We want to continue working to grow that engagement. But, I think it's important that we all, resident, guests, everybody have access to the services we need.
So CityCast Nashville is not just a news show, but it's also about giving people great recommendations. If you had to recommend one place in Nashville that anybody should check out, what would that be?
Oh, gosh. Well, I've lived here my entire life. So that's a very, very broad question. I will drive down to just the place that my husband is very interested in going this particular weekend, and it's Voodoo Gumbo in Bellevue. He is obsessed with their seafood, and we will be going back there because his birthday is approaching, and he's going to hit it as many times as he can.
Thank you so much to you for all of the things you do. Thank you for your service to me, my neighbors, and this whole city. Y'all, if you need help from your Metro government, from roads to trash to noise to trees, anything you need, just go to hub.nashville.gov. And they'll take care of you. You can also call 311 if you're somebody who just has a phone. But take advantage of Hub Nashville. Take advantage of what Erin does. Erin, thank you so much for being here.
That's all for today here on CityCast Nashville. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend? Rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Nashville newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye!